know how you're going to overpay. You're going to give him one of your young players, I guess, which again really isn't an overpayment. That's projection versus known entities. So I'm fine with it. But again, I don't see anything wrong with just holding off and letting him self-destruct on his own.
But doesn't it ultimately come down to, like, essentially the idea of this question, to go above and beyond Deebo Samuel specifically, would be you're gaining some extra intrinsic value by making a trade, right?
Right.
It's not just I get this player, I get this pick, I fill this need. It's what we talk about all the time, like your process trades where you're dumping a player for a pick. Maybe it is not a profit. The profit comes in when it's like I freed up a roster spot, or I allowed myself to make another trade where you're getting some value based on like your specific build, or you're gaining intrinsic value that's not just like an extra pick or an extra player. That's what he's doing here. He's essentially allowing his pick to go up maybe a spot or two by getting points off the other team's roster. So I think thinking in that regard, forget about the player. You should always be thinking about trades. Like, how often are we in leagues where 27-man rosters, right? Someone comes to you and says, Shane, I just believe in Kennedy Brooks more than every other rookie running back. I'll give you a third. The process is you just sell. Who cares if you love Kennedy Brooks, if he just went for, 90 yards and a touchdown in the preseason? You take the third, because in a 25, 27-man roster, what can you do? Pick up another running back off waivers, and you got a free third that you can spend later. So in that trade, you didn't just get the third. You got, hey, I got an extra roster spot. That's one less player I have to cut. That's one more player I can pick up. So it's the idea of gaining a little additional value. You got to spot that. It's not going to necessarily be obvious. So it's a good question, but I think you should always be thinking about dynasty trades. I mean, how many trades in the past have you made like that, where it's not just the player and the picks or whatever assets are going back and forth? It's, I have another reason why I want to make this trade. Like, even if it's like stacking, right? Like if you can trade into a stack, you feel like you're getting a little bit of an extra benefit to do that, right? By getting a player you can stack with one of your quarterbacks or something.
I think there's always intrinsic value in most of the trades you make. There's some intrinsic value that you go, well, on paper, no one else sees this, but I do. Or maybe they, you know what I mean? Like, they recognize it, but it's not something you can quantify. I can't go, oh, well, you know exactly what I mean. Like, there's always intrinsic value in the trades that you make, I think, in your own head. At least I know I do.
Or it's a fair deal, and the intrinsic value that really is only valuable to you and not the other manager puts it over the top to where that's when you're willing to accept it.
Right.
Like, so I think that's the question.
There's a trade I made earlier in the offseason, I don't even know, months and months and months and months ago now, where I traded away Antonio Gibson, and it was for James Cook, the pick that became James Cook, and a second draft pick. And that second draft pick became Brian Robinson. And we've talked about this before, because now I'm betting doubly against Antonio Gibson. So if he really does poorly, like, I've really made out well on that trade. Obviously, if he does well, then I've really crapped the bet on that trade, except that I still have James Cook on the other side.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think there's a lot of backfields where you can make that kind of bet. You look at like an ambiguous backfield and you say, okay, I'm going to pick one or the other. And I mean, you mentioned Buffalo, but you could almost say you could do the opposite with James Cook. Trade James Cook for Devin Singletary and a 23 second. Now, Shane wouldn't want to do that, but you can acknowledge where the person that's doing that has essentially like two ways to maybe not get crushed in that deal. What if Singletary's just as good as James Cook and you got a free second? Even if he's not, you still get the second. So you're giving yourself those multiple outs, and you're betting against the outcome that you traded away the player. You're doubling down, exactly like you said. So I think that's a great move to make with backfields. If it's Ronald Jones is going to get cut, so go buy some Ronald Jones and get a pick and trade away Clyde Edwards-Helaire. That's the same exact thing of what you were just talking about.
How the hell is Ronald Jones getting cut and camp hasn't even happened yet? Damn it.
I don't, that was my main thing, was when I saw that, I was like, okay, I can understand if we get into camp and it's 2 weeks in and he's by far the worst looking back in the backfield, and he's a step slower and, messes up some plays, gets Patrick Mahomes hit a couple times. Like, you know what I mean? I can understand that narrative. But when it's like mid-July and he's projected to not make the roster when they just signed him in the offseason, like he hasn't even done anything, very, very, very odd delivery with that. But we'll see what happens. There's going to be plenty of that over the next month of just like absolute debauchery that happens in these training camps with projections. So
literally news that people are just making up. Some random beat writer for some local neighborhood newspaper is like, I'm projecting the 53-man roster, and I project Patrick Mahomes not to make the team, and everyone will run wild with it.
Well, that's the thing, is it's a projection, and then it is phrased on the blurb of Rojo in danger of making the 53.
Yeah.
It's like, really, there's no, like, going from I project this to it's actually in danger is a little bit of a leap. But then, I wonder how many people clicked on that to see that.
All of them.
Tens of thousands of clicks on that article.
Yes. Roto World is great at that. Every blurb is Rashad Penny to see 25 carries per game. And then you go in and read the article and you're like, nope, not at all.
Yep.
Anywho.
All right, let's go to the next one.
We got a trade question.
Yeah, Anthony's trade. Go for it.
I like trades. All right. At Anthony. Nope, that's not his handle. At Mr. Meeseeks FF. I think that's right. Fun trade he made a while back. 14 team, Superflex, tight end premium. He didn't say how much, and I didn't ask. I should have. He sent Kyler Murray, David Montgomery, TJ Hawkinson, and he got back Kyle Pitts, Hollywood Brown, Zach Wilson, and Mariota.
I know where you're at on this. It's actually probably closer for me than you, just because Kyler in a 14 team now with his contract extension. I mean, I actually think regardless of the premium, unless it's 2 PPR, 1.75 PPR, Kyler's ahead of Kyle Pitts. Yeah, I think you would even agree with that. Even 2 PPR, it's probably pretty close. But I think even if it's 2 PPR, you probably put Pitts and Kyler and you wash them. But here I'd go Kyler over Pitts. Depending on the premium, you could argue Hawkinson. If it's a tight end premium, you could argue Hawkinson over Hollywood Brown just for the scarcity of the position with 14 teams. You know what I mean?
Yeah, if it's 1.75 or 2.0. If it's just 1.5, no.
But even 1.5, though, since it's a 14 team, at least Hawkinson is a guy that probably has a really good shot at finishing in the top 8, top 6. And then Zach Wilson and Montgomery, I would take Zach Wilson, but it just comes down to, like, your roster build. Now, I guess I'm curious as to what other quarterbacks the team that got the Pitts side has, because he's betting on Wilson and Mariota, so he's probably looking at his starting lineup and says, I have 2 quarterbacks that I can start right away. Yeah. But a year from now, you could look at those 2 quarterbacks and be a little scared. You know what I mean? Especially if you don't have any others and you maybe only have like another QB2, like a Matt Ryan type. Like, it's just hard for me to do trading Kyler away and really only getting this back. I would probably lean the Kyler side very briefly, and then I would try to trade Montgomery. Probably to Shane.
Yeah, definitely to me. I like, oh, Jesus Christ. I absolutely love Montgomery, and I love Pitts, but quarterbacks are king in Superflex, and this is a quarterback that is one of the guys that's in the running for a quarterback 1 every year, at worst somewhere in the range of QB1 to QB5. In a 14 team at that, I can't move him unless I'm getting at least. It's got to be a better quarterback than Zach Wilson, and then we could talk. The fact that you're giving up Monty and Hawk, which are usable pieces too, very usable pieces. I don't like it. I don't like this trade, Anthony. I like you a lot, but I really don't like this trade.
Yeah, he'll come back and say it's, start 2 tight end with 2 PPR or something like that. Then we're like, oh, Pitt's side smash. But until we know more context, then yeah. We had one more. This isn't really a question. I think this is just a jab at me, but it's Tyler Higbee, tight end 1. Larry Monkey. I know you hated Tyler Higbee. We were on the hot sauce pod, and you hate Tyler Higbee. You pretty much put him in the trash can category. But why can't Tyler Higbee be anywhere from tight end 8 to 16?
I mean, I could be a tight end 8 to 16.
Okay, so. And I believe the context of the discussion on Tyler Higbee was like, somebody took him at tight end 25, and it was like, he sucks. I mean, Okay, we're not going to go over what formats tight ends matter, but if it's PPR or 1.5 premium and start 1, they don't matter. So no, you probably don't want Tyler Higbee unless you have 3 Tyler Higbees and you can play the matchups, and he can maybe count as one of the guys you play the matchups with, but Other formats, give me Tyler Higbee. He's attached to an efficient quarterback, number 3 option on his team. I don't get the hate, but
Well, I think
neither here nor there.
The hate stems from the fact that everyone saw him have that 6-week stretch where he looked like an elite tight end, right?
Yeah, and you know
people
what? If
projected
he's
that people projected that into the next year, and then we saw, oh, he's actually not elite. He took advantage of the situation, which is good for him. A lot of players are put in situations and they can't take advantage of them. So just look, remember that 6-week stretch that he had fondly. Let it warm your heart, and just know that it's probably never going to be that good again.
But that's the ripple effect. Of course, it's not going to be that good again. But I think we have this we have this thing we do in Dynasty where we expect something. Most likely, we expect too much, too early, too fast, too big. Then it doesn't happen, and then we overcorrect. Like that player sucks.
Oh,
it's like it's the Trey Lance effect from last year, right? Trey Lance is actually better and more valuable now than he was last year. Why? Because we haven't watched him fail.
Yeah.
But other guys who failed early on, they absolutely are horrid, and there's no chance they could bounce back.
You know what? That brings up a good topic. Someone in the chat brought that up, and I can't find it now. But I don't have access to actually put any questions up anyway, so that works out. At the Dynasty, what's up, brother? Oh, Scott put himself on mute.
No, I'm here. I just saw it. At the Dynasty super chat. Now, I don't know where that super chat goes.
That goes to DLF.
Yeah, it doesn't go to Shane and I. But sure, maybe we'll go and try to recover it. Thank you for the donation at the Dynasty. This is Arnott. He just joined the Patreon the other day in DNC and was on our Zoom chat for way too long. 5-hour Zoom chat on Friday night.
Get your $20 back and go. Just go sign up for DLF.
No, we'll. You know what?
Fighter bet spurts or
don't worry. Don't worry about it, Arnold. We'll hook you up. We'll find a way to get that $19.99 in a good spot. So appreciate it.
Yeah.
Did you have a question you saw that you wanted to pull up?
Oh, I apparently imagined it. I could have sworn I saw. Oh no, here you go, from Ridley Truther, another one of our dudes. Yo, gents, this time next year. There you go.
Any of the 2023 rookie quarterbacks being drafted as a top 12 quarterback in startups? I would say that yes, but I don't know who. We could probably bet, but I would say if either, especially Stroud or Bryce Young, get to a point where they are top 3 picks next year's NFL draft, the community will probably put them right on that fringe. I guess that leads me to another question. Should they, Shane, after what we saw with Fields and Lance and Lawrence, should we take a rookie quarterback and immediately put him inside the top 12, especially if, one of Fields, Lawrence, Lance probably bounces back this year? They're going to be a top 12 quarterback. Then you have guys like Cousins, Stafford, Rodgers. They've done it for half a decade or longer. Where are you at with putting a rookie quarterback ahead of or right behind the likes of like Russell Wilson and Deshaun Watson and Matt Stafford and whatnot?
So, I take this personal because I went all in on Trevor Lawrence. Like, I drafted the guy like he was legitimately a top 8 dynasty quarterback last year. And then he came out and he looked awful. And metrically, statistically, he was awful. He's one of the worst 3 quarterbacks in every statistical category that you could come up with. So I'm probably going to be a little more gun shy when it comes to these quarterbacks. I got to see something before I'm just going to plop them into the top 6 or 8, especially when there's a pretty solidified top 6 or 8. Now, obviously, if I can get them in the middle of the first round in a rookie draft, fine. I'm not drafting any of these guys probably in the top 12 because I do expect either Lance or Fields to be in the top 12 next year because Fields, I think, even though the Bears are awful, he's got the rushing upside that he can survive as a wide receiver 1. We've seen other quarterbacks with that skill set do it before. Lamar Jackson, obviously, Lamar Jackson's special. Fields just kind of needs to be special. And I think Lance, we all liked him enough coming into last year, and like you said, he didn't play last year, so he's got that grace period where he can't. I think he's another one. He's got that skill set that he's going to be able to carry himself to fantasy production and be in the top 12. I'm going to have a really hard time putting another rookie quarterback in the top 12 ever again after Trevor Lawrence, who was a no doubt about it generational talent, came out and looked like just an average to below average starting quarterback in the NFL. And I understand that his weapons were bad. I understand that, Urban Meyer was a horrible coach, blah, 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 blah. All those excuses that we make, we have to remember that elite players elevate the players around them to at least make them good. If he would have just been decent last year, I'd feel pretty good. But he wasn't. So he's burned me bad. And if someone in his tier, a generational tier, the way that he was talked about, like Andrew Luck, came out and failed. CJ Stroud, okay. Bryce Young, who's 5'9" and 175 pounds soaking wet. Like, these guys aren't generational. They're good quarterbacks and they're good prospects, but not good enough that I'm going to just forget about the pain that Trevor Lawrence caused me.
I think this is going to be the key of whether you even see one have a chance at the top 12. Fields will get an excuse. If he's QB 15 in fantasy, people will actually rise him up because they'll say, oh, well, look, he outperformed his situation, right? So he almost has. We've gone so the other way on Fields now that people expect him to be horrible. So if he's like seen as really good, but his team is horrible, he'll get a pass for even another year, kind of like Lawrence did last year, right? Mm-hmm. Same with Lawrence. If he's good, but his team sucks and they go, oh, he doesn't have weapons, blah, 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 he'll sustain his value at least as like a top 12, top 14 quarterback in Dynasty just for that reason. Lance, you already mentioned it. I think Zach Wilson has a shot to crack the top 12 if he's good. If he stinks, he stinks. You can sit here and say you think he's going to stink. Fine. But if he goes out and has a good year, people are going to go, damn, look at all these weapons. You know what I mean? Then they're going to bump him up because of the weapons. So I think the 4 rookies from last year, excluding Mac Jones, all have a path to top 12. And if 2 of those guys stay or jump into the top 12, you're probably not going to see an unproven rookie because just do the math. Like, the top 8 or 9 is pretty much locked in. And then you have Stafford, Cousins, Rodgers. Like, one of the new rookies is going to have to supplant like 3 or 4 players. And a guy like Hurts is going to have to just fall completely on his face. Otherwise no one's going to take a rookie next year over those guys unless they're just truly like dynastying like you did last year. And I think you meant the last point on this is if you're in a portfolio leagues, don't be the guy that says, oh, I'm joining a new startup. And then you start CJ Stroud, Bryce Young in the first 15 picks, right? Don't do that. Get your shares in your rookie drafts and take the other guys in the first round of the startups, right, Shane?
Yeah.
Because those teams that you started like Lawrence Fields or Lance Fields, you're looking going like, man, I not only didn't contend, but I still am in no better shape in year 2. The teams that traded up and got the better quarterbacks are still crushing me.
Look, there's teams where I went Patrick Mahomes, Trevor Lawrence. And
those are still probably hurting a little bit too.
Those are hurting because my QB2 was so bad last year that I was streaming, I think, Tyler Heineke over him at some points, this season. And that's what happens when you miss, because it's not just that I missed on him. It's all that I gave up to get him.
J Mike says, hello. What's up, J Mike? Sorry, it's been a little while, but good seeing you. Ball is life. And then he puts his name backwards, which is cool. Friends, appreciate you. Pigskin Panic 21. Amen. I needed this. Amen. Back at you. Here's one, Shane. Bring back the garage.
Yeah, man. Bring back the garage.
The garage has, you would not want the garage. It has a bunch of stuff that shouldn't be on the podcast. All right. And just to let you know, I actually was streaming on Facebook for the first 5 minutes and then pivoted. That's why the views were at 0. So I don't think anybody, Dynasty Facebook isn't as strong as Dynasty YouTube or Dynasty Twitter. So appreciate Ridley Truther shouting that out in the comments. Oh, Ridley Truther had another one that I wanted to put up here too. So he did a 2.75 PPR.
Oh my goodness.
For tight ends. And he showed me the draft board, and guys like Hooper and Higbee are going in like the late teens. And people are taking like the wide receiver 75s over him. And I mean,
2.75.
2.75. I'm like, dude, if a guy has like 50, 505, that's like, do the math on that. That's like 15 points per game. That's more than like wide receiver 2s, So literally I said, just take tight ends without abandon and just take as many as possible. And I think you could flex like up to 4 tight ends. I'm like, dude, you should just take like 15 of them in the startup and have only like 3 or 4 receivers because the tight ends are just going to smash. So
Wow.
know your tight end format and scoring.
Know your format. Hey, so I had another question I wanted to add, but okay, good.
Now do this one first, then you add, because this is a good one.
All right.
Sean, he says he's been trying to get the 23 first like the rest of the world, but he also feels like he takes some of his good teams out of contention because he's trying to get them at fair market value, which is admittedly pretty high. So what do you think? I guess his question is if he can get a good deal on a 23 first, but he has to trade away a player that he knows is going to be in his lineup and probably helps his contender. What do you do? I'll let you take this one.
I mean, so you got to pick a lane. We've talked about this before, right? Like, what do you want to do? Are you okay with punting this year? Are you okay with, or do you think your roster's strong enough where trading that specific player and getting the 23 first isn't going to basically hinder you enough? And here's the good thing. Making trades right now for 23 firsts, say your team still does perform, you don't have to make that pick. You can still use it in season to get another player. And, look, it might feel silly, like, hey, I traded this for this 23 first this time, and then I traded it later in the season. Well, things change. You might not know that what your team's going to be. I like waiting for the season to kind of tell me what my team's going to be, because one thing I'm terrible at is projecting what players are going to do. I can look at what they did last year and go, I think he'll do this again. But, things change. There's teams all the time that I think are built really well. And for whatever reason, they crash and burn, and vice versa. There's teams that I think I've built like trash and somehow keep winning. So I kind of let the season dictate early in the season what I'm going to do. But what I will say is if you should always go with the value, because you can always get the players later. Basically, if you churn your roster in this way, where you keep getting a bunch of better assets, additional assets, you can figure it out later. Like you're saying, I can end up with a lot of wide receiver 2s. I can end up with a lot of players that I don't need and go out and flip them later.
Yeah, it's like the Mike Evans corollary, where someone comes to you and you have the best team in the league, right? And they send you a 23 first for Mike Evans, and you also have to give him a third. You're sitting there going like, man, this is a fair deal. I'm getting a little less than a 23 first for Mike Evans, but you're also thinking Mike Evans could score 18 points a game this year, right? You don't want to trade him on your contender. But I think the idea there is bank the first. You always can trade that first and actually buy some insulation back later in the year in the form of maybe a wide receiver that's as good as Mike Evans, but gives you an extra 4 or 5 years where you don't have to panic on that asset. Now, if you would have sent that Mike Evans for that wide receiver now, you probably don't get it. You know what I mean? You kind of have to take the risk that you're going to be able to reliquidate that pick at a later time. So I think that's the idea, Sean. I'm not saying every league trade all your win now players for 23 firsts, but I think the way to get some exposure is, especially if you're in multiple leagues, take it where you can and try to thread the needle to where you still look at your team and you go, you know what? I'm not destroying my contender. I might be hurting my contender, but I'm not taking it out of contention. There's a big difference. There's a big difference from I'm a contender. Let me ask you this, Shane. If you're a contender and you make one trade and then you don't feel like you're a contender, you probably weren't a contender to start. You know what I mean? One trade shouldn't take you out of commission, especially if it's a plus EV dynasty trade like that Evans for a 23 first would be.
Yeah, and that's what I'm thinking as you're explaining this process to them. That if you move one player off your roster and you're no longer a contender, then that's a problem. Now, obviously, we're not talking about Pat Mahomes. That's a little different. If you go from Patrick Mahomes to Mr. Trubisky as your QB1, okay, well, I understand that's definitely going to have a problem. But also, you shouldn't be trading the one player like that. You shouldn't be trading Jefferson. You shouldn't be trading Jamar Chase. You shouldn't be trading Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen. You should be trading guys like Debo. You should be trading guys like, maybe not T because he's super young, but Mike Evans, players in that range, because their value and their production, I should say, their production is replaceable. Their production, you might not get, and you love talking about this, 100% of that production, but you might get 70% of that production and still have a first to play with that you could still make your roster stronger if you need to later in the year.
Well, and you do this. I mean, you're more adamant about it than me. You're going through even good teams you have. Mike Evans gone, Tyreek Hill gone, Devontae Adams gone. You'll pivot down at receiver if you can get the proper value and you figure, okay, I'm getting what you feel is a dynasty trade value here, and you'll just worry about the assets later. And you know what? You got almost 40 leagues to mess with it. If you make one bad move and it burns you and it takes you out of a team that doesn't win the championship, you're still making solid dynasty value trades across the board, and you're just going to let the chips fall where they may.
And I think that's what the offseason's for, right? You look at your teams and you look at your rosters with a cold heart and you go, yeah, this team could win, but I don't want a 29-year-old wide receiver on my roster. Long term, that's a terrible play. I need to move them for a 25-year-old wide receiver plus. Now, when the season comes, obviously things change and I want to win titles. But I think if you do that, you're going to find that the teams that were going to kind of be bad anyway, they were still going to be bad. And it's probably best that you got out of Devontae Adams and Tyreek Hill and Mike Evans now.
Quick comment, open 24 hours. Hey now, what's going on? Had another one. Boys are back. Thanks, Kevin. Here's one for you, Shane, real quick. Joab 1223 picked up Brevin Jordan and Nico Collins. So John Mechie diagnosed with leukemia. Sucks for him, but I mean, it's dynasty. It's news. So you want to address it real quick? I mean, is that a guy you buy on bad teams, or are you kind of okay? I've been setting for I'll take a third for him just because unfortunately he's already dealing with a knee injury, and now this, it's not a guarantee that he even plays next year. So I mean, I think if I can get a pick to somebody that thinks, best case scenario, and hopefully it is best case scenario, but I think I would trade for a third.
Yeah, so I'm just going to assume he's going to beat it because I tend to be optimistic or hopeful for people. But even in that, no, I think I'd take a third for him just to get him off my roster. Just when there's real life events like this, there's too many variables involved, and I'm fine with just moving off of him and having him off my roster again, and I'll root for him, and I hope he beats it.
Well, and thinking about Nico and Brevin, I mean, honestly, did you really expect John Mechie to play much in 2022 anyway?
Not recovering from his knee injury. No.
I mean, I figured he'd be somebody that's a pump candidate to start the year, and he's a rookie too. So even if he comes back after, first midway point of the season, I don't know if he necessarily, if anything, this is a reason to sell Brevin Jordan and Nico Collins if you can get a second for those guys, because I don't necessarily think their outlooks change much with this news, but I think people may perceive that it does, and I'd be willing to sell those guys. Yeah.
Yeah. If someone wants to buy Nico Collins high off me now, he's all yours.
Yeah.
any bump whatsoever, all yours.
Jacob Musquiz, I believe he's just bragging, Shane.
Just trade it feels. Yeah, that's all that is. You can't come on here and brag. I mean, I'm happy for you
all the time.
Come on, man.
All right, you said you had one before. You know what it was? Remember?
So it was another Twitter question. It was at Lace South 69. Any advice on how to decide between blowing up the team for a full rebuild and trading away a key piece or two for a couple quality picks and trying a short-term refresh?
I mean, I think this is kind of what we were talking about with the trading for the 23 first. It's the same thing. I mean, if you have, your teams that are just absolute, pardon my French, but just dog shit. Like you want to blow it up, and part of it is they're just fun to blow up. You know what I mean? And you go all in on a couple of those teams. But I think for the most part, a lot of blow ups seem to be a little unnecessary, where people go, I'm going to just trade everything and then get on a bunch of picks. And then they realize they have a bunch of picks, and then they make all those picks. And then they realize, I still don't have a roster that's good, but I've just lost all my leverage over the last year or two because I blew all my picks on picking players and not trying to back end work my way back to contending faster. So I think the way I approach it is I'm always looking at my better teams and saying, where can I kind of skim the margins and actually sell players for picks, but not ruin I'm the league favorite all the way down to I'm not a contender. I always want to stay in the contender realm, but I also want to have the assets where I can go the other way if I ever need to. If I ever have a middle of the pack contender but not dominant team that all of a sudden starts out hot, I want to be the guy that has an extra first, an extra second, a couple extra thirds. I want to be the one that has all the assets to really push myself to the top, and I want to push when it actually matters. it's hard to say it matters in July because we don't know jack shit. But in November, we probably know, like, hey, these are the guys that are smashing. These are the players that are available in my league because those teams are wanting to sell. That's when I want to be the one that everyone comes to because I have all the picks and I have all the insulated assets. So that's how I would answer it is if you're just truly dumping everything, then fine. But I think most of the time we should be operating in the I'll always retool, but I always want to be contending. And I think if you just stick to some of the dynasty principles we talk about, you pretty much can always stay in that range.
Yeah, one thing when you're looking at a rebuild, reload, I never try to look at a team like, oh, in 3 years, this team's going to be ready to compete. That's what I'm shooting for. Like, I'm shooting for next year. Like, the most I'm willing to punt is 1 season. And being able to draft well, I mean, obviously would help with that. But you should know your own roster, right? I mean, you look at it, you can tell if someone can contend. And if you can't, you know what? Go hit submit, because I do this all the time. Go hit submit lineup and go, oh, holy crap, this team is stacked, or holy crap, this team is bad. Like, I'm literally like, I have 5 good starters on a start 12. Like, you know what I mean? You should know if your roster is good or not. And if you don't, do something simple. Go hit submit roster and see what it looks like.
Jacob says smash the like button. Yeah, please smash the like button. That would be appreciated. Moose skis, yeah. I like that. Now, he also asks, this one we're going to have to probably go the other way. He traded Kyler for Tua first and 2 seconds. I think that's too far of a down tier. Yep.
Yeah, that's a horrible trade, Jacob. So
horrible trade.
That evens out. Yeah, no, Tua is definitely 2 or 3 tiers below Kyler. So I'd need look, if I'm trading Kyler, I want at least Russ Wilson and a first back, to be quite honest with you. Russ Wilson type.
All right, rapid fire on this one. Should people be amped about Kadarius Toney's 2 games, Shane, or is he still a sell if other people want him?
Because we like fun things, and his 2 games were fun. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. Like, we like things that pop, right? Like, if someone went out there and scored those fantasy points in a less fun way, say they had 10 receptions and 100 yards, just very slot heavy, like not a lot of plays that pop, we wouldn't care. But we're easily amused, and things that entertain us, we like.
Ridley Truther again. He did share this in the DNC chat, but trying to buy Treylon Burks with deals like this, where you basically send Olave for Burks, but you get a pick upgrade with the Burks rumors spreading. But I think that he says people are too smart, that people are still kind of willing to be, they're buying that the asthma, not in shape, not going to be ready type stuff is BS, and they won't do those kind of trades. I think that he makes a good point. But I assume you're doing that, right? If you can get Olave for Burks plus, you're doing it?
Yeah.
Drew says trades in 5 last night. Yeah, check out Dynasty trades in 5. You'll see our 2 ugly faces with Clay's fine, nice. What would you say? Clay looks much better on camera than we do.
Yeah,
he's a natural.
Photogenic.
B. Zaltzberg has a trade question. He's sending Matt Stafford, Elijah Moore in the 107 and a 23 second. Does that get close to getting him Justin Herbert in a 12-team Superflex start 9? I think that's a smash if you can get Herbert for that in a start 9.
If you can, in a 4-point, you might be able to do that. The thing is, the second best piece in that is Elijah Moore, and it's a half-point PPR. So if the guy you're trading with understands the value, he knows that he probably would prefer a running back right there, because getting Stafford's a win-now move, even though obviously moving Justin Herbert. Look, give it a shot. It's not insulting. I'll say that. Like, if that came across on my trade alert on MFL on Gmail or whatever, I wouldn't be like, oh, this guy's a doofus. It's something I can at least work with.
Yeah, 111 or 107 is not getting him a running back either. So it's basically kind of sabotage planting 2, and not bad receivers, but in a start 9, half PPR. I'm not really inspired by like wide receiver 2s,
Right.
CXK, another trade question. 10-team Superflex, 2 tight ends.
Oh.
Jahan Dotson or Isaiah Spiller and Khalil Shakir. I don't think it matters. Give me Dotson.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, that's Dotson by a lot.
I mean, Khalil Shakir, quite frankly, is worthless. He's a roster clogger in a start 10.
I don't know. He could be the next Gabe Davis.
Yeah, I'll bet against it. I could be wrong, but you know what? if he does anything, you can buy back next year because, well, he's a 5th-round pick. He shouldn't have never been any good in the first place. West Coast Chiefer, another trade, another start 9 super flex. He gives a mid to late first and an early to mid first and Matt Ryan and Jameis Winston to get Justin Herbert. Still, even if it's an early first, I mean, he's still given less than 4 firsts for Herbert. I think in start 9, I would still do it.
Yeah, in start 9, he's upgrading from Herbert, from Ryan or Winston. I don't really care, or both, to Herbert. The first sucks giving them up, but it's start 9. Like you're betting on a top 3 quarterback there. That's what you're hoping you can get as a top 3 player with one of those picks, and it's just a hope. Let alone, like, you don't need them just to hit. You need them to be a top 3 player at their position to equal Herbert. So I like that deal a lot.
Yeah, 4 first. If it's less than 4 first, even just in cumulative value, then I'm still doing it. Shayton Holman says 16 team, 1 QB. Running backs are very hard to come by. He has Swift and Monty. How should he be valuing him, given him that? Honestly, in a regular 12-teamer, I agree with him that I'd be probably looking to pivot off one of those for especially Montgomery if I could get a 23 first. But in a 16 team, I can imagine a lot of the running back rooms in a 16 team don't even have one guy as good as Montgomery. So, I mean, are you just kind of riding this, assuming he's not like completely rebuilding? You just kind of saying, you know what, I'm going to beat 10 other teams with my running backs every week? Yeah.
Looking at that, there's in a 16 team, and he talks about running backs are hard to come by. Yes, they are in a 16 team. I'm not touching those. I mean, unless someone wants to absolutely get brutalized in a trade. Like they want to give me back Fat Lenny and a first for Montgomery. Oh, okay, sure. If they want to give me James Cook and a first for Montgomery, James Cook and a second, something along those lines, players and picks, then I'll make the deal. But no, sometimes it's okay just to hold.
Well, and it's single quarterback. If it's super flex in a 16-teamer, I could argue getting the picks has a little more merit because there's going to be 4 or 5 quarterbacks that are picks next year, in that format. But in a 16-team, 1 QB, we've talked about this on Trades in 5 before. 16-teamers, do you look at picks as like there's a higher delta between the good ones and the bad ones? Like you could think you're getting a stack trade in picks, and then it's the 203 and the equivalent. Well, the 115 and the 215 equivalent is the 203 and the 307 in a 12-teamer. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I definitely, I'm looking really hard at those rosters and trying to do some projection, and I might actually use a GM tool or two to try to see if that team's going to be bad, because I don't want the 116.
Are you more apt in 14 and 16 teamers to trade your picks for that same reason?
Yeah, because I have more control over the roster.
Yeah. Chris had a trade question, 1.75 PPR or higher. Is Dalton Schultz a sell? Getting the Goddard owner, you probably saw the Twitter thread yesterday that I put up with Schultz and Goddard. If you switch their teams, how the community would be different on him. But anyway, where is he going down in the depths of Henry, Higbee, just a second? Not a second. I'd want multiple shots if I'm trading Schultz. Even if I can't get a first, I want either multiple 23 seconds or I like Henry and Higbee. They're probably like borderline flex worthy in a 1.75, but I'd rather get like you get Trey McBride in a second in 23. Would you do that for Schultz?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's the kind of deal you look for, and you're trying to get some future value along with the second. You don't want to take I don't think I want to do like Higbee in a second,
Yeah, you don't want Henry in a second. You don't want guys in that range. Like you said, they could be tight end 8, but they're closer to tight end 16.
Loco, thanks for jumping on last night. Trades in 5. Appreciate it. Who would you rather target in a trade, Shane? Elijah Moore or Kadarius Toney? Yeah, not even close. Elijah Moore.
Yeah, I mean, just look at what Elijah Moore did, and I know they had a Garrett Wilson, but just based on what he did as a rookie, you add that to his profile, he's got a very high hit rate.
And he's a year and a half younger.
Yeah.
He was an early declare, early breakout.
He was drafted by this regime. There was no rumors about them wanting to trade him after his rookie season. Right. Just a lot of things there.
So Christian Watson starting on the preseason PUP with a foot injury. It's kind of vague, foot injuries are a little worrisome sometimes, especially with like big athletic guys. But we were out on him already, but I guess I can see the merit of buying low. Like I've thought about, do I want to go get Christian Watson? But here's the thing. Like, can you even really get him low?
No.
Like, I don't think he's fallen to where you can get him for a second. Would you pay a 23 second for him?
Yeah, but no one's. I sincerely doubt someone's going to take that. But
even though he was probably like a late first or 201, 202, 203. And now he's supposedly fallen in value just a little bit. Like it's right in the fair range. I just don't see the person that just drafted him being like, oh, sure, I'll take a 23 second. You know what I mean?
No. That's unless they drafted him because they were like, look, I'm just taking a shot because he's with the Packers. And now that he's hurt, you're like, you know what? Like I tried, forget it.
Yep. One more. We'll throw this up there. I starred 2 questions, but I'll throw this one up there. Wayne, strategy for 23 picks in Dynasty versus 23 Devy players. I wanted to hit on this one to end because assuming that you're in more than one league, right? I tend to think that next year's class is going to be good in terms of there's going to be a lot of people that like a lot of the players, but there's some of these positions, especially at quarterback and even running back, to where you're not really sure who the right landing spot / draft capital guys are going to be, but I'm confident those position groups are going to be valuable, whoever it is. But outside of the top couple guys, I typically don't want to bet on Devy players. If you can't say this guy is a locked in, quarterback's got to be like a locked in top 10 pick. Running back's got to be like a guaranteed slam dunk top 50 pick. If you have any questions and that guy ends up being a 3rd round pick, sure, he might be a 2nd round dynasty pick, but I don't want to bet on that for Devy. I don't want to bet on right now, Tank Bigsby. He's not guaranteed to go in the first 2 rounds. So if you have him in Devy, trade him to somebody else that's sliding him in as he's a 1st round dynasty pick.
Yeah.
Trade him in the Devy league. And if he threads the needle and gets there next year, guess what? He's going to be available at your 108 next year's rookie draft. Take your shares there instead of, I'm holding all these guys in Devy, because you're going to be disappointed in some of the names, and we're not even sure what names they're going to be.
And specific names are always worth less than the picks, because the pick can be anything.
Always.
So yeah, I'm never. I don't want to attach a name to it until I absolutely have to.
Always.
You got to go throw Jacob. One more.
Let's see. Where do we see that? Oh, yeah. Say his last name. It was cool how you said it, or how you would say it.
Mooskies.
That's it. Let's see. Half PPR, start 8. It's Brees, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, because his other running backs I'm very untrusting of. Although I don't like his wide receivers either. Combine some of these other players, dude. It's start 8. I know you didn't ask, but go combine Dame Harris and Akers and get a real running back, and go trade Mooney and Terry and get a legitimate wide receiver 1.
So the other thing is we don't know his context of if his team's contending or not. If that's the roster, I don't know if it is in a start 8. Does that change anything at all for you, given that you might be able to flip CeeDee Lamb easier next year for a Bijan level player? If he's out of it this year, does it make sense to look at who's going to be the most valuable player in that deal next year? And honestly, it could go 50-50 on which one it is. So
that's the problem is that I can't figure that out. I'm not that smart. I can project. But what I said earlier too, you shouldn't be rebuilding for 3.5 years, right? My rebuild should be, all right, next year I'm ready to contend. So Brees Hall since he's the running back in the start 8, I'm going to hold on to Hall.
That makes sense. I think that's probably where I lean too, because if you're ready to contend next year, it's going to be harder to find the hammer running back than it's going to be finding good receiver production. So that's where I'd go. Appreciate the question, Jacob. That's it, Shane. Hey. 48 minutes and it flew by.
It was fun, man. It was fun. We did a short one today.
Yeah, maybe we'll no promises, but maybe we'll try to hit one more in July. That would be July 31st, which means we can actually squeeze it in next Sunday, possibly. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, I don't have a social life. I think we can do
it. Yeah, we'll talk some social life questions next Sunday. How about that? So at Shane is the worst, at Charles Chill FFB, Dynasty Trades HQ, Dynasty and Chill, Trades in 5. Check out Trades in 5. If you like Manic and Chill, and you don't like necessarily Shane and I driving the show, you watch Trades in 5, because we do the analysis, but we don't do a lot of the transitioning and talking. So appreciate everybody. Thanks DLF for the platform. See you later.